Hello and welcome to the hello and welcome to the Pop Council podcast. There we go. The show where we cover everything in pop culture. Each week on the show, we'll discuss topics in the geek world, as well as various fandoms such as Disney, Marvel, DC, Star Wars, theme parks, and everything in between. I'm Jami, Philbrick, entertainment journalist and critic for We Live Entertainment, and board member of the Hollywood Critics Association. Today, we have an all DC show for you. We will be discussing Zack Snyder's Justice League, new casting with the Flash movie, and the brand new fan film, Batman Dying is Easy. This week, as every week, I'm joined by my co-host, Wendy Lee Szany. Hey, Wendy, how you doing?
Hello, everybody. Happy rainy morning in LA.
Rainy morning. You doing good?
Doing great. Got my little, just got this in the mail the other day.
Oh.
So I put it like where I'm going to work. So it's like smiling at me and it's happy.
Awesome. And we are joined this week by the great Scott Menzel, our leader at the Hollywood Critics Association and We Live Entertainment. Scott, everyone knows who you are, but tell them a little bit about yourself anyways.
Oh, I'm just excited to be here. You know, it's a privilege to put myself on the Snyder Cut episode of this show because
your
I'm
debut.
so freaking excited to talk about this movie with you guys. I've been
That was no accident.
It's no accident. But you know, we have to when you open this up, Jamie, you have to let Wendy go first because none of us know what Wendy thinks.
Okay.
So we have
why you guys been talking?
I will tell you that I know Wendy had 2 buckets of popcorn when she watched her movie. I know this for a fact.
The amount of snacks.
Wendy loves her snacks. Wendy loves her snacks.
It's a 4-hour movie. 4 hours and 2 minutes. I needed it. I needed all the snacks.
All right. Well, as you can tell, we are dying to tell you what we think about Zack Snyder's Justice League. All 3 of us have seen it. It will drop. I think there's actually a premiere on HBO Max's Facebook and YouTube pages on Wednesday. Or wait, is it Wednesday or Thursday?
I thought it was Wednesday. I got the invite, but I don't remember.
All right, well, we're going to have to figure that out to give you the correct information. But it does drop on Friday on HBO Max this week, March 18th. So, Wendy, let's just get right into it. Let's start with you. How did you feel? What did you think? What was your reaction to this 4-hour director's cut?
So, I will say I try to kind of not overhype myself going into it, and which was kind of hard because I was already hyped. I had really been liking all the kind of individual trailers that they've been putting out to promo this movie. And of course, we were talking about just last week on the show, Zack Snyder was at our 4th annual HCA Critics Award. So, you know, just kind of having him talk about his acceptance speech for the Valiant Award and the hard work, the heart and soul that him and his wife and everybody on the crew put into this movie. Like, you just can't help but be excited. This is definitely, you know, for the fans. So as a fan, I was as a nerd and as a fan, I'm like super excited. So I purposely didn't watch the final trailer that they had put out just recently. And I know people are like on my YouTube page asking, so you guys aren't going to react to the trailer? As I was watching the movie, I'm like, there's really no point now because any reactions I give wouldn't be authentic at all. And plus, I didn't want to try to set the bar too high or too low. I just kind of wanted to go in to see what his vision was, and what makes it a 4-hour journey, right? So I will say, I thought the 4-hour runtime, I was a little cautious going in. I was like, okay, 4 hours, got to plan out my breaks. When am I going to want to hit pause? Because sometimes you're in the movie, you're in the moment. You don't want to pause and then you lose the momentum. And then you come back, you're like, oh, wait, what just happened? Right. So I was kind of prepping myself for that. But I thought the runtime made it justifiable for all these characters to have more well-rounded story, not just for, you know, the characters that we already know and have had movies to kind of help flesh out their characters by this point, such as a Wonder Woman and a Superman and Batman, but specifically for the Flash and for Cyborg. I loved that they got kind of a more proper introduction and that it wasn't, you know, too rushed or anything like that. So I enjoyed those telling aspect of those characters, I enjoyed. Can we? How? I don't want to go into spoilers, but I would say also for Steppenwolf, also got a similar treatment where his character felt a little bit more fleshed out, and I enjoyed that more because then he didn't seem so like flat as a character. You know, where I was kind of like, okay, big bad character comes in here, you know, like all this and that, but you know, with you know his axe swinging and stuff like that, like what's the motivation? I feel like in this one, they gave us a lot more insight into some of his story and some of his motivation, and of course the extended footage, the extended scenes, and whatever new scenes they shot. A lot of it made the story just made more sense. Where in the theatrical cut, where you're kind of going, how did they get from this point to that point? But okay, and then this one, you kind of sit back and go, and I also like seeing that a lot of the scenes that I enjoyed watching in the theatrical cut is in this cut, which means that those are all the ones that Zack filmed. So it made me really happy, and like naturally, I enjoyed all the Wonder Woman scenes.
Well, naturally. That is interesting. I did find myself sort of going through the movie and saying, "Oh, Whedon reshot that, and he reshot this, and this isn't his, and this is ours," and you know, Zack's, and the way they kind of reshuffled a lot of the scenes. And but I want to reserve my thoughts till after we hear from Scott. Scott, what do you think about? What is your initial reaction to the film?
I mean, I hate to sound like the fanboy, but like, wow, just wow.
Please go ahead. Yeah, I feel the same. Go ahead. Fanboy
I mean, you watch this movie, and right from the opening sequence, you know that this is going to be a totally different journey. You don't have this iPhone of Superman talking into this and wondering, like, what is going on here? This is really weird. You're sort of thrown right into the events of Batman v Superman. And you're along this journey. And I talked to a good friend of mine yesterday, Wilson Morales, and he was saying the movie itself is very poetic in a lot of ways. And I agree with that assessment. Every scene doesn't feel rushed. It takes its time. It's a build. And while maybe the first half of the movie is a little bit slower, I feel like it makes the payoff that much more rewarding. So you're going on this journey. You're setting up each individual character. You know, Batman, Bruce Wayne is taking the lead. He's setting everything up. You get to know everyone one at a time. And that is something that I just felt was so incredibly rushed in the Whedon cut of the movie. And in this movie, you get to see everything fully fleshed out. And I think the most important takeaway from this movie when I finished watching it is you never interfere with a director's vision. You need to let the director do what they want to do. People are not always going to love it. People are still not going to love this cut of the movie, but at least you know that people who know what he was envisioning finally got to see that unfold on the big screen. Or hopefully some people will see this on the big screen. I got to see it on my 85-inch TV, which is a pretty big screen.
Aren't we so cool? I got my 47-inch.
I know, I realize like I'm very lucky with the lifestyle that we've been able to shape for ourselves out here. And I don't mean to gloat about it, but I mean, it's in the freaking pandemic. I haven't been able to leave the freaking house. I've been working nonstop. So I was like, I'm going to treat myself, to quote Parks and Recreation, treat yourself. I'm going to treat myself to a big TV. And that's what I did. I mean, it was one of the only purchases I made during the pandemic. And I mean, it's worth every freaking penny with how many damn movies I've been watching on the big screen.
How big did you say the TV was? Sorry, Jami.
85 inches. Yeah.
So that takes up the whole wall almost.
Yeah.
Does it not?
It does.
Whoa.
It does.
That's pretty cool.
It's ridiculous. Ashley was kind of like, we don't need this, but I was kind of like, yes.
You don't need it until you have it. And then you're like, well, okay.
And then you can't go back.
Well, I'm glad that you got to see it on a bigger screen. I watched it on a pretty big TV myself. I have to agree with what both of you said. A couple of points, Wendy, as far as the way that it was recut. and just the way that I totally agree. I understand why the studio needed to cut a 4-hour movie. Like, I get it, especially in 2017, they weren't going to release a 4-hour movie. And to your point, Scott, the first 2 hours are a lot of setup. And so even if you split the 4-hour cut in complete half and release 2 different movies, the first movie is going to be a movie where it's all set up and Superman doesn't appear. So I get why the studio could not sell that movie in 2017. But my problem, and I agree again, Scott, like, a filmmaker, if you hire a filmmaker, you got to let them make their film, right? But one of the things that I hate, and I think this happened in BVS as well, is when the studio comes in and says, we need to cut things, they cut all the stuff that has to do with the plot of the film you're watching. They leave in all the hints for future things and little, Easter eggs and stuff like that, but they cut the motive. I mean, in this film, all the motivation of every character that wasn't Superman, Batman, or Wonder Woman for the most part was cut. And so in the Snyder Cut, we get to understand why Cyborg does the things he does, why Flash, why Aquaman to a certain degree, and definitely why Steppenwolf is doing what he's doing. And so it just adds to the movie and makes the movie make so much more sense, right? So I loved that. But I said this to Scott, and I also put this in my review, the difference for me between watching the Snyder Cut and watching, let's call it the Whedon cut, the theatrical cut, is the difference between reading a classic novel or just reading the Cliff Notes. It's just the beats in Whedon's movie. It's not the movie. It's not the tone. It's not the pacing. It's not the gravitas that I really felt from this epic sort of Lord of the Rings type film that Zack made. And the other thing, and I said this to you, Scott, the other day, was, really tried to imagine, when I realized I liked this or loved this movie as much as I did. I do think this is a masterpiece. And I thought Watchmen was a masterpiece. And I think when Zack gets to actually release the movie he wants to make, he's a brilliant filmmaker. But I really tried to imagine if in 2017, I would have liked this 4-hour cut in a theater as much as I do now. And I think that it took a couple of things. I think it took us seeing how bad this could be, right? Seeing the Frankenstein Whedon cut and realizing, how bad it could be and how good we had it with Zack, where we're starting to say, okay, let's give Zack a chance to, give his vision for this. But also, Zack had a darker vision for the DC universe, right? We know that. It started with Man of Steel, went into BVS, and then would go into the Justice League films. And you have to remember that when Zack started making these movies, it was during the Obama administration. I don't want to get too political here, but I think that that's an important fact, because I think fans were looking for a happy-go-lucky Marvel-style, big, funny, shiny type of version of the DC universe. And Zack gave us a very deconstructed, gritty, grim look at this world. And maybe it was too much for us. I mean, even I thought the theatrical cut of BVS was just too dark. And but I wonder now that we went through the Trump years and we went through 2020 and this pandemic. And let's be honest, Trump is sort of the Lex Luthor, right? Like, Lex Luthor became president in the comics. It was an evil president. You could make that comparison. You could make the comparison that 2020 and the pandemic has been like the anti-life equation and apocalypse coming to Earth, right? So I think that we as fans and as an audience are more ready and prepared to accept the grim and gritty version of the DC universe that Zack has given us than we would have in 2017. And I just want to sort of open this up to both of you to see if you have any thoughts on that.
Wendy, you want to go first?
No, you go first. I'm trying to collect my thoughts.
Okay. Yes, I mean, I think that's a great point. And I think that's the problem with fandom in general. You have people who want certain types of movies, right? So people are very happy with the Marvel formula, and we like more of it. Me personally, that's what makes those movies so hit and miss. It's either I connect with the character, like the main character the movie's focused on, or I don't. So there's a lot of love-hate relationship that I personally have with the MCU, because I feel like every movie is pretty much set up the same exact way. When I watch when I watch Snyder's work, it is very dark. I mean, it's probably darker than Nolan, which is pretty interesting to say, because Nolan's movies are pretty freaking dark. But he really kind of showcases, that these characters are flawed, right? And that's something that is shown throughout this version as well, is that these characters are not perfect. They have their own backstories. They have their own problems. And I love the fact that we see superheroes sort of in the same way of like a Boys from Amazon, where like they're not perfect, right? They're actually pretty damaged, and they destroy cities, and there's repercussions for that. And I think that's something that's lost in a lot of the superhero movies. Like thinking back to like Avengers, the first Avengers movie, they freaking destroy New York City, right? And there's no repercussions about it at all. When there's a fight in Man of Steel, everyone's like, oh my God, Superman would never do that. What's going on? And it's like, wait a second. So you're holding this in a different standard than that movie? And it makes no sense. So ultimately, I think you have this luxury in a comic book universe where you can have multiverses, and you have all these different characters, and they can be played by different actors, and they can have different storylines. So therefore, I'm kind of on board with like the happy-go-lucky ones, or I'm happy with like the Joker movie by, from last year with Joaquin Phoenix. Like, I love that character. I love what Joaquin did with it. I want to see more of that character, just like I want to see more of the characters here. But I'm also okay with the Flash being goofy and sarcastic and funny and being in a lighthearted movie. I think there's a bigger conversation to have about this as well, going from the original Wonder Woman and how that was received, where it has some lighter but darker moments, to the 1984 movie, which we all know did not really connect that well. And I personally think back on that movie, and I have more and more problems with it the more I think about it. So I think it's part of a much larger discussion that I'm so glad that we're having right now. Wendy, I'm curious to hear what your thoughts are.
So remind me of the original question, because now my thought's been going for like a minute.
So I'm basically wondering if if you would have loved this version as much as you do in 2020 had it been released in a theater in 2017.
Okay. I think if it had been released in 2017 as a 4-hour movie, as we saw it on HBO Max, I may not have, because I felt like, while I enjoyed a lot of aspects of this movie, and it like totally makes sense, to have this runtime to flesh out the characters and the storyline, to bring all these characters together. Certain scenes, the pacing was a bit slow for me. Kind of like what Scott said, the first half, definitely slower than the second half. So in 2017, 4-hour movie, I may not have connected with it as well. However, 2017, we split it into a 2-movie event. Yes. I never had a problem with a superhero movie going too light or too dark. My thing is always the story, the tone, it's got to serve the character. If it works for a certain character, takes Guardians of the Galaxy, for example, right? So a little bit more out there. It's a little bit more like, I don't want to say meta, but it's got its darker moment, but it's also lighthearted and funny and fun. And I can enjoy that, and I can turn around in the same day and enjoy a Christopher Nolan Dark Knight movie. Right. It's just got to serve the story and the characters and in which way they're taking the story. So if it all works, great. I don't feel like there should be a rule when it comes to superhero movies, comic book movies, like it needs to be light or it needs to be dark. It just needs to work for the character. So actually, I think I would have liked it in 2017. Long story short, I just don't think I could sit through. It's hard for me to sit through. I did it at home.
Right.
And I took more breaks than I thought I was going to take. I was like, okay, I'll just do intermission, halfway through, set that timer for 2 hours. I'll get up, stretch, go to the bathroom, whatever. I took way more breaks than I thought I was going to take. Because sometimes you just it's the story, and certain scenes again dragged a little bit for me, where I was like, oh, I need to get up and just for a minute, and then kind of sit back down and collect myself and dive back into the film.
Right. I mean, I think some ways, I was just gonna say, I think in some ways, Zack was damned if he did and damned if he didn't, right? I think there was a certain zeitgeist that was sort of out there to get him to begin with, and maybe he's such a visionary that we just wouldn't have been able to accept this. He's really ahead of his time, I think, in a lot of ways. I think if you look back at Watchmen now, you can kind of see that. So, Scott, I wanted to sort of deep dive into some particular points of the film, but did you have something you wanted to say real quick?
Oh, I just wanted to add that I agree with your points, damned if you do, damned if you don't. There's a much larger conversation that Wendy brought up about like runtime and length and sitting through movies. I mean, it has been nearly impossible for me to sit through any movie over the last year without pausing it at least once. I think I've done it like twice. And that's full disclosure. And I'm someone who is totally like invested on watching movies and not being on a cell phone or a computer. But even I have fallen victim to the fact that I cannot sit through most of these things. I will say the fact that it's broken up into 6 parts and you can kind of get to each of those parts, you kind of have 6 built-in breaks. So you kind of watch like an episode of television where you're like, okay, part 1's over, pause 1 second, let me go to the bathroom. Okay, part 2 here, let me go get a refill on my drink. Hey, more popcorn, part 3, things of that nature.
Or like I need a Postmate ice cream because all of a sudden I really want ice cream right now, even if we only have 45 minutes left in the film.
Well, and for me, 4 hours is a long time not to walk the dog. So I had to take a Murphy walk break and a couple pee breaks of my own. But I know what you mean. And I also think that the pacing, for me, the story was so well paced, even though it's obviously very, very long. It worked for me. Like I was able to go. I never got bored. I never really. I mean, there were certain points where I was like, "This is a long movie," but I love it. I'm completely in it. So
it's the opposite of the Irishman. So the Irishman, you sort of watch the Irishman, and you're kind of like, "Oh my god, someone needs to go back to the editing room and cut some of these scenes out, shorten them down." With this movie, it's weird because it's building to something and you have some action mixed in and like different characters. Things are happening. You're not just kind of like sitting in one room where like someone's driving in a car for 20 minutes and you're kind of like, okay, here we go. Something's building. And I'm that's my problem with most Netflix movies right now. Even in something that I love dearly, like The Prom, there's like 15, 20 minutes of that movie that could be shaved off. And I think Netflix is kind of working on like with directors of kind of like letting them do their vision. But like there are some things, and I think you can even argue that for the Snyder Cut, there are certain aspects of this where you kind of been like, okay, you can kind of shave a little bit of this off. Maybe it didn't need to be 4 hours. Maybe you could have got 3.5. And then you can't really complain that much because you did have like a movie like The Irishman that ran that long as well. And some of the classic great movies from like the early days of Hollywood, like The Godfather, for Christ's sake, long movies. And those runtimes are warranted as long as the content's there. You just have you got to cut out the fat.
I didn't hear anyone complaining about Avengers Endgame runtime.
Right.
You know what I mean? Exactly. So, and again, in many ways, Zack was ahead of his time. I mean, he would have had a 4-hour or a 3-hour movie two years before. So I wanted to deep dive into a couple of points about the movie. I think we've already basically mentioned how sort of
but no spoilers.
No spoilers, but how a lot of these deleted scenes really gave back motivation and backstory to a lot of the characters, Steppenwolf and Flash and Cyborg in particular. Again, no spoilers, but I think everyone's aware there's a new scene in the film, and it's a nightmare sequence. So without really giving away any of the key points about that scene, what did we sort of think of this new scene in the movie and how it kind of adds to the film? Scott, I'll start with you.
It's like the icing on the cake, right? You literally like the movie's ending. I mean, like, I guess that's a spoiler. Sorry if it is.
I actually don't think that is.
Okay.
I think it's been said that the nightmare scene comes at the end.
Okay. All right, cool. It's like that gut punch in the end where you're just sort of like, oh, oh, this is where this could be going. And you're sort of like, it's almost like it is primed to like start that hashtag that's been starting this week of Restore the Snyderverse, right? Because you're sitting there watching this and you have all this and you feel very satisfied. It's, as someone in the comments says, it's like a prime beef steak. I mean, it's very true. Like you feel it's a good meal. You walk away from it and you're like, oh, I feel satisfied. And then you get that sequence and you're like, oh shit, this can really, really go somewhere. And you're like, okay, I'm ready for this. And I thought I was great. And I love the fact, I know people have problems with Jared Leto. I understand. I know I don't like getting into the politics. I like just appreciating movies and actors for what they do on screen. I don't worry about their personal lives and things of that nature. But I already can tell that that's another different version of the Joker that I would not mind seeing brought to life in a bigger film and in a, fingers crossed, because we can never say never at this point, maybe a sequel.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah, I really liked, without giving it away, I thought Jared's performance was great. And I think that this has been said that he has dialogue with Batman. So I really liked Affleck and him off of each other in that scene and everyone else that's in that scene and what's going on. I think in a way, Scott, it was sort of Zack kind of putting in a trailer for, if you might want to give me another chance, this is where we might go. And I also thought, Zack has said that the movie ends on a cliffhanger. And now that I've seen it, I understand what he means. But I also don't think it really is a cliffhanger in sort of the traditional sense, in the sort of Empire Strikes Back sense of it. I feel like there was sort of closure and a satisfactory ending to this story, even though there are little threads of opening up to the future.
It's not like the first Lord of the Rings movie where they walk to the mountain and then the movie ends and you're kind of like, wait, I sat through 2.5 hours for them to get to
no, it's way more satisfying than that. So, Wendy, what were your thoughts on the nightmare scene?
Don't speak ill of Lord of the Rings.
Yeah, no, exactly. And
don't do that. I love that movie. Okay, so
thoughts on the nightmare scene, and also if you felt the cliffhanger was satisfactory.
I, for one, don't feel like it's a cliffhanger.
I agree.
I don't feel like it's a cliffhanger. I think it just kind of leaves the door open for if there's an opportunity for him to do something like this again. The door's open, and the people that needs to make it happen just needs to walk through it. I think it does give the fans a little bit of a glimpse into what could be, right? Because we don't know if there could be more. I know there's been kind of talks of like there could be a second Justice League. I think we talked about this, but I don't want to get anybody's hopes up. Like, this is definitely going to happen. But like, is the door open? Oh, it's open. You don't even need a knock. You could just walk through, essentially. For the nightmare scene, I actually enjoyed seeing it because I didn't know what to expect, how much compared to the theatrical cut, what it was going to be. I am still having trouble in my head if I like the placement of the nightmare scene. That was kind of and I've been trying to feel it out. I was like, let me sleep on it and let me see how I feel. Cause I watched this really late last night. Like I entered the movie at midnight.
Oh, wow.
And I started it at, I tried to start it at like 7:30, whenever it was. And I had some trouble with, but anyways, besides the point, I don't know if I would have liked it towards like the third act instead of in the final like book end of the movie. I'm not sure how I feel about it. Like last night when I watched it, I was like, why are they putting this at the end? Doesn't make sense that it's at the end. It should have been a little bit earlier. Not at the beginning of the movie, but just a little bit earlier.
I agree with you.
Or at least before the scene before that, maybe. But then this morning when I woke up, kind of thinking back to especially the conversation that Joker had with Batman, especially some specific things that he said that I can't say here because it's too spoilery, kind of made me go, well, maybe it is better at the end to end the movie there and go, oh, wait, he said what now? So I'm still struggling with if I like the placement of that scene or not.
That's interesting that you say that. I actually, without giving anything away, was a little surprised with all the talk of nightmare scene that there was actually less nightmare scene than I had imagined there would be. And also, without giving anything away, let's just say that there are images from the nightmare scene that appear long before the actual new nightmare scene. And sort of more in the middle-ish, if you know what I mean. Okay. And so I actually thought that would be where the full scene took place, when those sort of teasing images happen in the middle.
I see. And,
yes. Yeah, yes. I don't want to say too much, but you know the point I'm talking about. I was a little surprised that we didn't get more of Nightmare there. But that being said, that's interesting where it kind of ends up in the movie.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think it's also a little bit too tacked on at the end. If I'm gonna be honest about this, you kind of have an end credit scene, and then you're kind of like, oh, what's this?
Well, I don't know if you noticed.
There you go. Here's another one.
There are actually 3 end credit scenes that are the final 3 scenes of the movie.
There was one that I felt that we didn't need, but that's just me.
Right.
There's one in particular.
There is one in particular that features 2 characters, and I'm pretty sure when it was originally shot, it was going to feature a different character than one of them ended up being. That's my guess. So one other thing, without being careful, Zack had said that there was going to be a cameo at the end of the movie that were going to blow people's minds. Wendy and I speculated about what that cameo would be a few weeks ago, and I think we were.
I don't even remember what we said.
we were right. We were right.
Oh, okay.
So my question to both of you, without giving away what that spoiler is, did it blow your mind? Because it didn't exactly blow my mind, but only because I think I knew that it was coming.
I don't think it blew my mind because I think internet was talking about it as well.
They were.
So I think it was one of those. It's great that it's in.
Yeah.
I don't think it elevated the movie more that it is in.
No, I mean, by definition, the end credit scenes don't really, they're just end credit scenes. So you're right. They wouldn't really, they're teasers.
But I mean, the specific cameo, specifically, not talking about the end scene, but that specific cameo.
Because that cameo, by that point in the film, has already been spoiled, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so it doesn't hold
that moment had a lot more weight to it than the other one, where I was like, wait, what? Oh,
which was surprised me that Zack would put that sort of in our heads going into. I mean, it almost deflates the scene, that final scene, in a sense, because I think there are going to be fans that are waiting for some crazy superhero name that no one ever thought of. It's going to be Hal Jordan, or it's going to be, Dr. Fate or something, and it's not Dr. Fate. It's not that crazy. And then last question, then we'll move on from Zack Snyder's Justice League. But where do we want this to go on? Do we want to see more? I mean, how do you feel as fans, as critics? Do we like where Zack is going with this world? Do we want HBO Max and Warner Brothers to allow him to do more of this? Or are we satisfied with this? And what do you think will happen? Scott, I'll throw it to you.
I mean, if I read your review, and it's up on We Live Entertainment right now, just to give you a little plug. I think if you asked me a year ago, I would tell you this would never happen. Like this cut would never have happened.
I would have said this.
Like you said in your review.
Yeah.
And I probably would have said like we would never see any of this ever again. But I think based on how much people are enjoying this so far, and you didn't even get to the fans yet, I think HBO and Warner Bros. Has like a big problem on their hands if they were hoping that this was going to be over and done with now, because they opened the box, they opened one of the mother boxes, and guess what? They want to see the other 2 of those mother boxes and see how they play out. And I'm very happy to go on this journey. And I'm intrigued. I think the movie warrants a follow-up. I mean, I don't know if we need 3 movies. I don't know if that's going to be stretching out too much, but I would like to see a proper send-off, if you will, now that you know that there was more planned. I would like to see how that's planned out. Maybe just kind of make it up front and be like, okay, like we'll do 1 more of these and like that's it. Like I don't care what anyone says, we'll do 1 more, but like let him kind of play out the story the way that he wanted to, because we know that this was supposed to be a 2-parter originally. So let's make it the 2-parter and then be done with it.
Absolutely.
Right.
Wendy, your hopes and thoughts?
Well, kind of piggybacking off of the sort of the end of the movie that we're talking about, there certainly is definitely the path's been laid for more for this to continue for at least another part, right? So there could be that. It's just there's a lot, depends, like, you know, one, like fan demand, like will that be there? And kind of like to Scott's point, I feel like the fans whose outcry got us the Snyder Cut may also get us the sequel to this one. But I think there's a lot, you know, pending on whether if Zack like would want to do this. It's a lot of work. You can't just snap your finger and make a movie of this scale happen. You know, it's a lot of scheduling and writing and story and location and all this and that. So, and if he wants to take on the task.
That's a good point.
The other thing for me is with this movie, I've always said in the past that I wished certain characters got their standalone movie prior to us seeing Justice League, and that Zack was faced with sort of a really, really hard job of not only bringing the characters together in an ensemble film, but also giving all the characters their own spotlight, plus introducing the characters that's not even yet been introduced into this universe. How do you do all of that in 2 hours? Obviously, it's hard because but he did it in 4. He did it in 4. So if this movie happened split into part 1, part 2, it would have been great. But I at the end of the movie, I kind of sat back and I went, wow, he actually he was able to the best of his ability to, you know, he did it. He was able to give those characters that we have yet to meet, you know, haven't had a standalone movie, to give them their stories and why they all joined. Like, he did it. So I feel like if the man wants to do another, like a sequel to it, I really think somebody needs to have the conversation with him and be like, yes, let's go ahead and like do this. How do you want to do it this time? Do you want to split it into 2? And like really sit down and listen. And if the runtime of 4 hours is still a no-go in theater, which I totally get, then like let's just split it into 2 parts. But like let his vision come through, because it came through in this film. It certainly fleshes out, you know, it's a much better watch than the theatrical cut.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I agree. I mean, I loved it. I hope that there is a chance we could see more, because I would love to see where this story goes. I think that's obviously going to depend on, you know, how it does on HBO Max, but the critical reception and fan reception so far has been, I think, what they want. So I think that's great. Yeah, I think it depends on if Zack wants to do it. I think he would maybe not be dealing with Warner Brothers as much now and dealing more with HBO Max. So if they're going to give him full creative run then to do an HBO Max style, then I would think that he might want to do that. So I hope for more. And one more point that I was just thinking about, I wanted to mention before we move on. Did anyone else notice that Mira has an accent? Amber Heard has an accent throughout this film, and not in the Aquaman movie, which makes me think that James Wan chose to get rid of Mira's accent.
But did she have it in the theatrical cut?
Oh, that's a good question. I'd have to look.
I don't remember. That was one of the questions that I had.
That's a good question. I'd have to look at the theatrical cut, because I actually rewatched Aquaman last night. She definitely does not have an accent in Aquaman, and I thought her accent was quite good, you know, acting wise. So I feel like that would have been a choice. So I don't know. Maybe the studio decided during Whedon's reshoots, nope, no accent, and then that went through to Wan's Aquaman. But I just thought that was interesting to sort of bring up. But Wendy, good point. I need to look at the Whedon cut to now see if she has the accent in that or not. I don't remember. Moving on.
One quick point before we move on. Go ahead. Because I think Wendy brought up something that is so massively important, and that is you got a full-fledged story of Cyborg in this version of the movie, and he did not have his own origin story. And you got enough backstory for the Flash to kind of lead into his now standalone movie, which is why I'm going to say this, and I know this is probably going to be a controversial thing to say. When you look at Infinity War and you look at Endgame, and you look at those characters, majority of those characters had standalone movies. Some of them had multiple standalone movies. Others were introduced in multiple movies. You kind of had like no other opportunity here to do this. So when you look at a movie that was basically structured around, 3 or 4 movies in total? Because Aquaman came out after Justice League, right?
Yes, it did.
So like essentially you had 3 movies to ground this entire universe. And I think in this cut, he fucking pulled it off. Pardon my language. I just think that's something to say, considering the fact that there is 20 movies in the MCU to lead up to that buildup. You had 4. And arguably, we can probably have another conversation about this on another day. Maybe people will like those movies more, the Avengers one. But what he was able to do and pull off, to Wendy's point, it should be celebrated. I mean,
absolutely. It's remarkable. Yeah, it's an absolute masterpiece. I agree. And I just want to make note that Scott Menzel has now opened the floodgates for swearing on this show. We have not used curse words up until now, but I'm a big cursor. So now I know that I can drop the F word whenever I feel necessary. I'm so glad to know that. Moving on, we had some big news this week in Flash casting. Kiersey Clemons is in as Iris West. I don't think that that's a coincidence that her scene is put back into Zack Snyder's Justice League. And then it was announced this week that she will return for the Flash movie, as well as casting for Flash's mom, Maribel Verdú, will be playing that role. But unfortunately, news this week came that the great Billy Crudup, an actor I've always loved, who does appear in Justice League as both cuts, as Barry Allen's father, will not be able to appear in the Flash movie due to scheduling with the morning show, which I believe he won an Emmy for this past year, the Apple Plus series. So what do we think about the casting news, about bringing Iris West back into this world, and unfortunately having to cast a new Henry Allen? Wendy, let's start with you.
I mean, I feel like the Kiersey Clemons was like not really news in my opinion, because we had seen the snapshot and like, again, the internet had been talking about it. So it just kind of makes sense for her to, be one, to appear in the Snyder Cut, and 2, to be, to play Iris, to like formally be announced as Iris West in the Flash movie. I am really excited that they are actually putting Maribel Verdú in this, just to get, like she's going to serve, if you guys know the Flash story, I think by now everybody probably does, that she's going to be serving like a pivotal point to the movie, as to probably the motivation for Barry to do certain things, to run to certain places. But yes. I am a bit sad about losing Billy, because one, I think the casting for likeness is pretty on point. So I'm a little sad that and I really enjoy his acting. So I'm pretty sad that we won't have him in the Flash movie. So does that mean they're going to recast, or does that mean they'll just leave his part be kind of like, we talk about him, but Barry doesn't really go and see him? And if they do anything, they'll do like a younger version of that in flashback, and that's it.
I think recasting is what I read, that is going to be the direction they're going to go. Unfortunately, I don't think they want to do it. I don't think he wants it, but it's a scheduling, issue. Before I go to you, Scott, I'll just say about the Kiersey Clemons. I do not think she would be in Flash if her scene was not restored for the Snyder Cut and it was being put out right now. I think
really?
Yes, I think that gave the filmmaker, you know what I mean? Like it gave him, I think that before the Snyder Cut was being released, and it's interesting, each topic we're going to talk about today is going to go back to Snyder Cut, but I think that the Snyder Cut being released before that was decided, I think that, and before, AT&T and HBO Max really came into the Warner Brothers picture, Warner Brothers wanted to get away from that. They wanted to get away from the failure that was Justice League. They wanted to get away from it being linked into their DC universe at all. So I think there would have been more reason to cast a new Iris West if this scene hadn't been put back in, and there wasn't, obviously, and she's a great actress, has nothing to do with that. I think that this tells us a little bit that they're hedging their bets. They're not going completely away from the Snyderverse, but they're not completely sticking with it. They're kind of going both ways. And I think had that scene not been put back in, had this not been released, I think Warner Brothers would have continued to distance itself more and more from Justice League and would have cast a new actress. Scott, what are your thoughts?
No, I agree. I think that's what kind of gives me hope that maybe in the next week or two we might see some Ray Fisher casting news.
I think he's burned some bridges.
I mean, I don't know.
For good reason, but I don't know.
It depends on the support. And I mean, I kind of think, again, going back to the movie, there's a relationship developing there. And I feel like seeing that fleshed out in in another movie would be more beneficial, even if they don't go the same way of like the second Snyder cut or whatever. Like I think there's purpose there. I also think, again, to your point, seeing that scene in this movie, like it's a tease, right? Like you're kind of like, what's going on? Like I'm like, who is this? Like you're watching it and it's intriguing. But you're like, it just kind of doesn't get fully developed. And then seeing this news earlier this week, before I watched this, I was kind of like, now I see it's coming together. So I think the casting so far has been perfect. I'm sad about losing Billy as well. I think he's a criminally underrated actor.
Absolutely,
absolutely. For so long.
Yeah, I agree.
So
he's
the
golden god.
More.
He's the golden god. Remember, Almost Famous. He's a golden god.
Yeah. I love that movie. I love. There's a little movie that came out at Sundance a couple of years ago called Rudderless, which had Anton Yelchin
William H.
in him.
Macy directed, right?
Amazing. Yeah,
William H. Macy directed. Yeah. Just to your point about Cyborg, and I think it would be great, and especially after we see how great Ray Fisher is in this version, to have him come back for Flash. If HBO Max was making the Flash movie, I'd say that's possible. But since it's the executives at Warner Brothers that he has, basically put out on point and said, you guys did some shit. There I go. My first swear on the show.
There you go.
I find it hard to believe that they're going to hire, unless there's some sort of mea culpa, some sort of, we're sorry, we were wrong, which I don't necessarily see the executives of Warner Brothers doing either at this point right now. I don't see that happening, but I do hope that some kind of, let's call it a truce, can be reached, and we can see Ray Fisher play Cyborg again in the future, but I don't know if it'll be in a Warner Brothers produced Flash movie. Does that sound about right?
Yeah, I mean, again, I'm literally running on the fact that anything can happen at this point.
Yeah,
that's literally this whole thing. I mean, you talk about a Hollywood dream. I think this whole thing is a Hollywood dream. So, like,
you're absolutely right.
So it's like, maybe, who knows? I mean, you're right, but it's like, 3 days from now, we can find a whole scandal happens with someone at Warner Brothers, and then he gets let go, and then all of a sudden, he's back in, and he has like a 3-pitcher deal. Who knows?
You're so right. All bets are off. Especially now that we have the Snyder Cut in our hands. I think all bets are off. Well, let's go to one other topic, DC related. Also, you sort of mentioned a dream. I think that this film for many people was a dream. And of course, I'm talking about Batman Dying is Easy, which is a fan film made by Bat in the Sun, which is this great YouTube channel that you check out. I've actually seen them for years. They do these little sort of videos that are Batman versus Deadpool, what would happen in a fight, Wolverine versus Iron Man, those kind of things. And they have great production value and costumes. And as you can see here in this shot, this is Batman and Michael Madsen as Henry Bullock in this fan film that also features many DC characters. The Joker, Doug Jones from Shape of Water plays the Riddler. It's a really fun and well-made and well-produced fan film. So let me open it up. Wendy, in general, how do you feel about fan films? Have you checked out a lot in the past? And what do you think of this one?
I like fan films because it gives the fans the ability to tell, one, to kind of flex their director, creative muscle, which I think everybody, if you have that drive to do it and if you want to try your hand at it, like, go for it. And then that can only expand to, something like what Bat in the Sun did with fan films such as Dying is Easy. Like, you can, and I think there was like a couple of Star Wars, like the Obi-Wan Kenobi one with Jamie Costa, like, you can kickstart it and you can get some funding behind it. You can get some really great actors as to be a part of it. And I think that's all really great. And it shows that how much these characters, these comic book characters and their stories resonate with us. And it not just wants us to kind of follow their story and pick up a comic book or watch a movie, but to also say, well, I've got this idea, like, what if? And that's like what's so really cool about like multiverse and things like that and alternate timelines is you can't ever look at a fan film and be like, well, that's not blah 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 blah. It's like, well, no, this is this person's creation and it's their vision, so like let them have it. It's not canon. It's not released by a specific studio, so just let people, or don't watch it. Just don't watch it. If you're gonna crap on it, don't watch it. So I enjoy supporting fan films. I like to kind of see where their mind goes. And, I'm always surprised by production value. I'm just like, wait, this is a fan film? But, Bat in the Sun, I've followed for years, just kind of like you, Jamie, like when they did their superhero beatdown. I don't know if they continue with that series. I think they've kind of shifted to, like higher production Kickstarter type, which I think it's great. They have an eye for talent. I love their stunts. Like that's always been like the thing that drew me in first. So I kind of like seeing that's been consistent throughout their projects. The acting is great. Special effects is like really, really good. Yeah.
Bat in the Sun is great. I mean, it's really, I thought this was really impressive. Production values and costumes and obviously got some great actors. You can tell that Michael Madsen is completely walking through this. I mean, his acting is maybe some of the worst acting in the whole movie. And there are non-professional actors in it, right? And then you can see little things like you can see sort of how the green screen was used and, there's a weird sort of, I think they kind of crossed the line in a sort of a shot with Bullock and Batman. So there's little sort of like filmmaker things that obviously if Zack Snyder, professional filmmakers, studios were making it, wouldn't quite, be a little bit better, but it's still really impressive. And the thing I always remember is I think back to Batman Dead End, right? Which was that Batman movie, fan film, came out in the early 2000s where Batman fights Joker, a Predator, and an alien. And I remember that film was showing at conventions after the Schumacher Batmans and before the Nolan Batmans. And fans were really clamoring, saying, like, this is Batman. This is the Batman that we want to see on the screen. And what's interesting for me in watching Batman is Dying is Easy is that it still feels like this fans saying, this is the Batman that we want to see. And now that we've had Christian Bale's Batman and even to a certain degree Ben Affleck's Batman, I don't know. It was almost like a moot point for me because it's like, it was more resonant to me, these really well done fan films before we got really well done movies for fans. Superhero movies weren't necessarily made for superhero fans when these studios started making them. And now they do, obviously, the Marvel movies and obviously Zack's film and a lot of the stuff they're doing DCU. So it seemed kind of like, I don't know, as good as I thought it was for a fan film, like, I don't know if we really need fan films anymore because the studios, in a sense, are making them now. Scott, what are your What are your thoughts on the movie and what I just said?
Well, I'll be honest. I'm not as well versed in these as you guys are. I seen a few of them. I mean, the one that instantly springs to mind is the Power Ranger one. That was released a couple of years ago.
Oh yeah.
And I remember watching that, and I was kind of like, "Whoa, this is pretty freaking amazing!" And to Wendy's point, you kind of got to give props to the costume designers on these and the special effects artists. I mean, they look like better than a lot of independent films. And, I think the budget is probably way less. But, man, the love and passion that people have for these fandoms.
I think this film was
amazing.
Was 50 grand, I read.
50, that's it?
Dying is easy?
Yes, that's what I read.
Wow.
They raised it I mean, maybe more, but it crowdfunded $50,000 to make the movie.
That's impressive. Yeah, and I thought, kind of to your point, and I'm a child of the 80s, so like I grew up and I remember, of course, Superman and Burton's Batman. And like those movies I felt like were very much like made for fans, but also great to watch cinematically. And then you had that like bad run in the 90s. Like when Schumacher came in and then followed up with Batman and Robin, and then you had some Fantastic Four and Blade and Spawn and all those movies. Like they just kind of got worse and worse and worse and worse. And then you had Spider-Man, and that started like raising the bar again. And I think that's when the genre of superhero movies became what they are today. They started becoming better and better, and people became more and more critical of them. But yeah, it's weird. I mean, I want fans to continue making these things, but I do agree with you that they don't have as much of an impact unless they're really, really superb. Like, I mean, that Power Ranger one, if you remember when that came out, like people were talking about that just as much as the movie that came out that same year. So that's pretty impressive. I think this one, I mean, Michael Madsen just walking through his lines. I mean, I think he's been doing this for like 5-10 years, where it's just like literally, I'm the same character. I'm old and I'm miserable. It's the same thing over and over again. But the look of the Batman, I mean, to me is what really sold me. And the freaking Batmobile in the beginning, I was like, wow, this is badass.
Yeah. Casper Van Diem has a cameo as Commissioner Gordon, which I thought was really good. I mean, he's just real quick on a TV set in the background, but I was like, oh, that's Casper Van Diem? That looks pretty. He looks like a young Commissioner Gordon. And then the Harley Quinn who appears in the movie is Scarlett Johansson's stunt double from the event as Black Widow. It's her Black Widow.
Heidi Moneymaker?
Yeah. Yes. Is that the name? I don't know the name, but that is her stunt double for those films.
Look it up just really quickly to make sure we got the actors.
So I thought it was really, really good and an interesting film. Well, that is pretty much all the time we have this week. I mean, I think that we could sit here and talk about Zack Snyder's cut for another hour. Real quick.
Go
ahead, Scott.
I just want to let you know, like you were right, 100%. It's the 18th that they're doing the premiere. It's not. Okay. It's not Wednesday.
Got it. So that's Thursday night.
Right before, right when the film comes out.
Is it on HBO Max, or you would watch on HBO Max's Facebook and YouTube page?
It's a Snyder Cut watch party hosted by Zack Snyder itself. It starts at 4 p.m. Pacific time, 7 p.m. Eastern time.
Watch party, fun.
On HBO Max.
Yeah.
Oh, excellent. And so you'll get to watch the film and along with Zack.
Yes. And I think Kevin Smith's doing it, right? And it is in
of course Kevin Smith's doing it. Of course he's
the girl's name. She's so sweet. I can't remember the girl, the black girl who does all the pop culture stuff. She used to be at AfterBuzz.
Tiffany
Joelle?
Smith. Oh, no, Tiffany Smith.
Joelle?
Joelle Monique.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Great.
Yeah, she's doing that too.
Awesome. We look forward to that. Little housekeeping here. We want to thank everyone for tuning in and remind you that we are just one of the shows the Hollywood Critics Association have been launching this year. So make sure you hit that subscribe button, like this video, and tune in to Pop Council every Monday at 11 a.m. We also have Horrifically Horrifying on Wednesdays at 11 a.m. with Heather Wixon and Kevin Taft. What to Stream on Thursdays at 11 a.m., hosted by Morgan Rojas, and What's Trending in Hollywood on Fridays at 11 a.m., hosted by some guy named Scott Menzel. I've never heard of him. I don't know where this guy's from. But Scott, thank you so much for joining us today. Tell everyone where we can check you out in the future.
Sounds good. Thank you so much for having me. You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Scott D. Menzel. And over at We Live Entertainment, I don't write as much as I used to. I've been doing more of the interview stuff, but Jamie's been a writer over there. And I guess, Wendy, now I can open that opportunity back up to you about writing over there every once in a while.
Yeah, for sure.
Sounds
and
good.
Wendy, thank you again for being here with us, and tell everyone where they can check your stuff out.
This was a really fun conversation. I enjoyed it so much. You can find me on Instagram and Twitter at Wendy Lee Szany.
And I'm Jami Philbrick. You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Philbrick, and on Facebook at Jami Philbrick. We'll see you next week on the Pop Council podcast. Until then, enjoy every sandwich. Thanks so much.